In this tutorial, we'll be learning how to cut and sew this stylish butterfly bubu that you are seeing on your screen. Hello, my name is Odato Singh. In case this is the first time you're seeing my channel, and you're welcome to all my returning subscribers, you're also welcome. Thank you for stopping by today's video. Now, this tutorial is about how to cut and sew this BUBU butterfly dress that you are seeing on your screen. The difference in all these dresses is just the neckline and the length of the gathers or the length of the pleats that is attached to the butterfly dress. It is the same approach and the same way basically that is used in cutting all these dresses. The only thing that differs is the neckline and maybe the length of the gathers depending on how you want it. If this is the first time you are seeing my channel, consider subscribing and don't just subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so that you'll be notified the next time I upload a new video on this channel. That being said, let's dive right into the video. The basic measurements you need to consider or you need to measure on whoever you're making this dress for are the full length, the bust, the waist, and the hip, and maybe the armhole. For mine, I used this Ankara fabric, and because this Ankara fabric is just 44 inches long, I will not be folding my fabric this way. I'll be folding it straight, like the way you fold bubu. And for the length of the gathers, I used 13 inches because I want mine to be 13 inches long. You know, it depends on your preference if you want it long or short. So this person's full length is 58. I deducted 13 inches, and what was remaining, I measured that in two places, one for front and the other for the back. Then I added 2 inches allowance to both the front and the back in length. I will use 1 inch to join it to the gathers at the front and the other 1 inch to join it to the gathers at the back. So I cut that out. I folded it into four. I made sure that the right side is up. You know, ideally when you are marking on a fabric like this, you should be doing all your markings on the wrong side. But in my case, I did mine on the right side because butterfly like this, you like bubu like this, you sew it on the right side. So the first I did was to mark the neckline. For neck width, I used 7. On fold of 2, I marked 3.5, and at this point I used neck depth of 1. I'm still going to make the neck depth more than 1, but for now I measured 1. The next I did was to measure a bust point from the shoulder line. You know, this bubu will not be having joining on the shoulders. So from our shoulder line, I measured 12. 12 was what I used for the bust point. And on this bust point, I divided our bust by 4. I added 3 inches allowance because I don't want it to be tight at all on the person. Now, from the bust point, I measured 5 inches first, then 8 inches next. So in total, I measured 13 inches. 13 inches is the hip line from the bust point, and on this 13 inches, which is the hip line, I divided our hip by 4 and then I added 3 inches allowance. I marked that as well. So I connected the hip line to the hip point to the bust point, and on the lower part of this dress I marked 2 inches upward, then I marked it down depending on how firm you want the leg side to be, but in my case I want it free, so I just marked it down like that. Then for the armhole, I used, although a firm armhole, like a proper armhole, is 18, but in this case I used 20, so I marked 10. Then the next I did was to open it up and then I marked it. I opened the first two, like I raised the first two up. I marked it on the other side so that when I get to my machine, I just sew straight. That is why it's important to mark on the right side if you are cutting butterfly bubu like this. Mark on the right side so that when you get to your machine, you just sew straight on what you've marked. I cut out the edge because I don't want that name, that design, the company name to be showing, so I have to cut it out. If you don't have a problem with that, you don't necessarily have to cut it out. Then I later used neck depth of 5 inches. I measured what I have on this part of the dress because that is what I'll be considering when I want to cut the gathers. So what I had here was 44. Currently this is 22, but you know it's on fold of 2, so that's 44, and that 44 I multiplied it by 2, and you remember the length is 13. I'll make the length 15 inches. So I cut a piece that is 88 inches long and 15 inches wide, like 88 inches in length and then 15 inches in breadth. I cut two of that, one for front and the other one for the back. And for the front of the dress, I sewed trimmings on it. So I just marked where I will sew the trimmings on it. I marked straight line so that when I get to my machine, it will be easy for me to just follow the straight line and sew the trimmings on it straight like that. So when I got to the machine, the first thing I did was to sew the trimmings. And when I was done sewing the trimmings, I proceeded to using bias to fold the neckline front and back together. You remember there is no joining on the shoulder line. Then for this piece that I used for the gathers, I gathered it to 44, which is the length that I have on this upper part of the dress, and I pinned the middle of it to the middle of the front panel first. I started with the front and I stitched it on the front of the dress. Then I did the same thing to the back of the dress. I gathered the piece I used for the gathers into 44 inches and I sew it on the back panel. When I was on doing this, the next I did was to remember that I cut out the side of mine because of the name on the Ankara. I double folded it from one side to the other for one side, and then I did the same thing to the other side. And when I was done doing this, I folded it down with, remember I added 2 inches allowance to the length of these gathers. I used half inch to sew it to the upper part of the BUBU, and I used the remaining 1.5 inch to fold the down. Fold for front separately and then fold for the back separately. And basically that is it for the cutting and sewing of this kind of butterfly BUBU. Like I said, the only thing that differ is the neckline and how long you want the gathers or the pleating to be on the dress. Aside that, it is the same approach and the same method for cutting bubu butterfly like this. If you want to cut a butterfly that there won't be gathers at all, it's just for you to sew from up to down. Just make sure that you leave, like, if there won't be gathers, leave like 10 inches allowance towards the down of the butterfly unsewn so that the person can walk freely. And even for this one that has gathers, I stopped my sewing at that 2 inches. Where I stopped my marking was where I stopped my sewing, like 2 inches before these gathers. If you remember, that was where my marking stopped when I was marking it, and that was where my sewing stopped. I stopped my sewing there. It's just for easy movement so that the person can walk freely. So for this gathers part, you're not going to join it at the front, and like you won't join front to back at all on this gathers part. I hope my explanation is clear. If this video has been helpful to you, please give it a thumbs up so that YouTube can suggest my video to the right audience. If you have any question, ask me down in the comment section. This is the outcome of mine. If you've not subscribed, kindly subscribe and turn on the notification bell so that you'll be notified when I upload a new video on this channel. And as much as you can help me share this video. You don't know who it might be helpful to. Have you seen any of these videos that are currently showing on your screen? If you've not, you should check them out. I have a lot of beautiful boo sewing tutorial on my channel as well. You should check them out, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.